Ever notice how many devil fruits are not actually eaten intentionally?
No way!
Luffy accidentally ate his devil fruit. Boa and her sisters were forced to eat devil fruits. Buggy accidentally ate a devil fruit too. Momo ate a devil fruit because he was hungry, and that's just to name a few. This demonstrates how not everyone eats a devil fruit with the intention of gaining power. Instead, some of these people seem fated to do so, which could be in part why Imu usually sees these people as enemies, but I'll touch on that in a sec. What's most interesting here is the fact that devil fruits are super old. In other words, they're potentially relics of the true history, and as such, they may hold key information that might flip the global system. And these aren't the only relics either. We have poneglyphs, and they hide one of the greatest truths in the world, the location of Laugh-Tale. So the question is, why is the past such a secret, and how does Imu use the true history to rule over the world? Every 1,000 years, the One Piece world is ravaged by natural disasters, abolishing the current status quo by destroying and shifting land and sea. This puts the global order in disarray both for the geography and for the people. This means every 1,000 years is almost self-contained, as histories and technology are wiped out under the reoccurring global cataclysm. If this is the case, the world likely has its own forgotten history. People forget their true heritage, and Imu can suppress people taking their rightful place. Imu probably originated pre-Void Century, which would mean that Imu has an idea of the true history of the world, as she may have been present during this time. Hey, it's Denden, and today we're looking into another spicy theory. As always, there's a little bonus towards the end of the video, so stick around for that, and make sure you like and sub, and let's get into this. If the world and the majority of its histories were wiped out, then people would be left with no idea who they are, why they are where they are, and how the world used to be. But what if there was someone that stayed above all of these global disasters, kept an eye on the coming and going of histories, and maybe even orchestrated some of these events? But how could one person control the entire globe for such a long time? If Imu knew of a global cleansing or expected it somehow, then she may have planned to capture the newly formed world as it emerges from the aftermath. This is achieved through the extension of the world government, propaganda and oppression, which creates a dream that encapsulates everyone. The perception of the people, whether it is their belief in gods or their fear of the world government, keeps humanity and its progress at bay, most of all technology. In turn, this has created a nightmare from which the world's people cannot escape, and Imu uses this nightmare to solidify her own position at the top. However, all is not lost. Strangely enough, oppression seems to breed desperation, which leads to imagination, hope, and change, and now it appears like Imu's time may almost be up. But how will this unfold, and why is this the case? One Piece has a super interesting hidden motif, subtly portrayed since the very first chapter. This motif is how Imu has managed to keep herself a secret as well as rule the world this whole time. The motif I'm talking about is traumatized children, believe it or not. We often see references to sheep or lambs, which are metaphors for innocence and youth. These lambs seem to play an integral part in Imu's plan, as well as how global events unfold. We see this symbolically in the cover story where Robin reads a book to alpacas, causing them to fall asleep and dream bubbles that float up. The reason behind this is that these special individuals have a particularly strong will, dream, or destiny, usually accompanied with a traumatic backstory. I've previously discussed yokai at length, which is just one example of how Oda shows us this motif. Kuma is a great example and is very relevant currently. He lost both of his parents due to the ruthlessness of the celestial dragons and suffered intense bullying and harassment as a child, just to hold his faith and be blessed with the hands of liberation in a church littered with Joy Boy's symbol. I've been covering this symbol for years now, so feel free to check out older videos to find out more. Similarly, his daughter Bonnie inside the same church willed herself to be older, causing a physical change to her body. Both these cases demonstrate how the imagination of young people can be very powerful in One Piece. It might be that imagination is in fact the key to defeating Imu. This would explain the focus on children in the One Piece story, as children are known to have imagination that is far more open than adults. This has been covered in other media as well, such as The Shining and other Stephen King novels. Children are commonly seen from the very first chapter all the way up to present story. Lamb or Sheep's House, depending on the translation, was Mother Carmel's orphanage. It harboured abandoned and abused children, just to be sold into the service of the world government. We see here that Carmel is no longer Sister Carmel, but instead is now called Mother Carmel. And furthermore, the orphanage's name refers to the innocent children, all of which adds to our motif of oppressed kids. Little is known about the identity of these young orphans' backgrounds, which does actually include Big Mum, except for a small clue that we got about one, suggesting that he was once a prince. Despite hints towards the children being eaten alongside Carmel, it appears they can be seen years later in the story under different branches of the world government, for example in Impel Down and Cypherpole. So, some of these oppressed children go on to rise up through the world government ranks, while others are cast aside and shut away, such as the Impel Down prison guards. Continuing with the orphan theme, parents are often absent in One Piece, as Marco explained with Whitebeard's backstory. The flashback depicts war-torn orphans, with Oda explicitly stating this is a product of conflict. In the background we see someone resembling a young Zebek, sat in the same position as young Blackbeard when he was crying under the moon. Time and again it's hinted the world wars seem to create many traumatized and lost orphans who grow up to deal with this either by liberating the weak or by ruling them. For example with Dofi, Law, Rebecca, Shirahoshi, just as some examples of this. These war-torn orphans are who Oda is referring to when he says sheep, and it's these people that seem to be able to meaningfully affect change in the world. So by taking these sheep under the wing of the world government, it's one way that Imu reduces the threat that they might become. Cypherpole is probably the best example of this. By tying the orphans of Lamb's House with Cypherpole Zero, we discover that the children are used from a young age. Not only this though, Cypherpole members are often shown to be related or descended in particular from each other. Examples of this can be seen with Spandine. A couple of Cypherpole relatives were revealed at the O'Hara incident. One of them wasn't revealed, but looks very much like Who's Who. The orphan from Lamb's House that's wearing a mask resembles Maha in the future, however in the past resembles a character that was shown to be a god's knight. So here, as I say, we can see nepotism. It's being kept within the system. This is potentially how the world government maintains control over the elite and secretive Cypherpole, whose duties concern guarding the world's secrets at some points. They operate behind the scenes to neutralize threats before they can gain momentum. For instance, CP9's mission in Water 7 to acquire the blueprints of the ancient weapon Pluton demonstrates their role in eliminating preemptive threats. This branch of Cypherpole was persecuted for their failure against the Straw Hats and were pursued all the way to a mysterious island, which I personally assume is Aegis. Their leader, Rob Lucci, is said to have been accompanied by his mysterious bird friend Hattori from a very young age, and I believe we'll see this revealed to be another form of monitoring and control. Also, hints that the control is not working as well as it used to can be seen in Egghead, where Lucci directly disobeys some of the highest orders that can be given when he attacks Luffy. So by controlling and observing young prospects, Imu can recruit them into the fold and have them join her cause, as opposed to going against her. They also do this with pirates, forming alliances with powerful crews through the Shishibukai system, which has, to be fair, since been abolished. This not only helped in dealing with other pirate threats, but also ensures that these powerful individuals do not become enemies of the state. We saw that even Mihawk eventually got tired of dealing with the constant attacks by the world government. Now, I mentioned Cypherpole controlling information. This is true to the point where they're trusted with extremely secretive tasks, like the kidnapping of Nefertari Vivi, or, for example, the escorting of the Gomu. This is risky for Imu, as the truth may be leaked, which is what we saw with the Gear 5 Luffy bounty poster, despite the Gorosei demanding not to make the image public. In addition to this, we saw Shanks take the Gomu, which is a fundamental moment in the timeline, and is a brilliant example of how losing control of the true history of the world could really cause some problems for the world government. This leads us to another method by which Imu controls the world: the flow of information, as well as pushing misinformation. This encapsulates the entire globe in a controlled narrative. The Truman Show is a very popular movie that is pretty much about this exact idea. In the One Piece story, however, we see countless examples of this too, from being forgotten in Level 6 Impel Down to scrubbing the true histories of the world through destroying the ancient kingdom. The world government extensively uses propaganda to maintain control and manipulate public perception. They control the flow of information through media outlets like the World Economic Journal, ensuring that the news presented to the public aligns with their narrative. This propaganda portrays the government as a benevolent and just authority while framing pirates, revolutionaries, and anyone else who opposes them as dangerous criminals and enemies of the peace. The real truth, however, is currently, under the world government, there is no peace, only fake peace, making Imu a fraud. This is done by controlling the narrative, such as the Vinsmokes acting as the villains of the World Economic Journal comic strip Sora, Warrior of the Sea. Nolan's truth was essentially covered up by Nolan's Book of Lies, despite the stories being true. The Bragman stories are portrayed as being exaggerated stories, thus the word brag in Bragman, although through the course of the Straw Hat's adventure, we realise these stories are largely true. Interestingly, these were actually amongst the books of O'Hara saved by Sol. Now, the author's name of the Bragman tales is said to be Louis R. Note, and while despite some of the biggest brains in our Discord trying to crack for years why Oda chose this name, we still don't have much idea, except for one small thing. The only anagram that can be made from the entire name is a resolution, perhaps hinting that these extraordinary stories are the resolution to escaping the terrible clutches of the world government. Lastly, more direct cases of this propaganda happened recently when we saw the news saying Luffy kidnapped Vegapunk, when in fact Vegapunk asked Luffy to take him. Big News Morgans is Oda's counterpart to this by spreading his own propaganda. There is another form of propaganda the world government uses all the time, however. Imu uses bounty posters as a method to demonize pirates and other individuals who oppose their authority. By issuing these posters, they brand these figures as dangerous criminals, placing hefty rewards on their heads to incentivize their capture or elimination by people such as bounty hunters or the general public. We see the effect of this reversed recently with Cross Guild, who are now putting bounties on the world government's head, as if they were pirates. This practice not only paints the targets as menaces to society, but also justifies, for example, with the bounty posters, the government's pursuit and harsh treatment of the individuals. It serves to instill fear and compliance among citizens, discouraging them from sympathizing with or aiding those who challenge the government's rule, thereby maintaining their control and suppressing rebellion. The idea of demonizing is pretty literal in the One Piece story, as we know from Joy Boy being called a devil, for example, or fruits being called devil fruits, Robin being referenced as the demon of O'Hara. Furthermore, they employ symbols and public ceremonies to reinforce their legitimacy. The execution of Gold D. Roger, the pirate king, was turned into a spectacle to deter piracy and solidify their power. Through these tactics, the world government effectively controls the narrative, ensuring that the majority of the population remains obedient and supportive of their rule, while dissenters are isolated and vilified. I'd like to see it revealed that this is the case with our oversized friend Oars. Oars' tyrannical history is notorious and came to us through the warlord Gecko Moria. It's likely false information, with many theorizing that Oars was an ally or some connection to Joy Boy and moved continents to liberate the oppressed. On the other hand, however, the ancient giant was depicted as a devil from Dante's Inferno during the Thriller Bark arc, so maybe Oda does want us to villainize Oars. Poneglyphs are said to hold the, and I quote, true history of the world. These were made during the Void Century about 900 years ago, which we know Joy Boy was involved in making the poneglyphs from the apology left to Poseidon signed by Joy Boy himself. Now, considering Vegapunk just revealed Joy Boy lived at the end of the Void Century, that gives us our time frame. Where it gets really interesting though is the actual contents of the poneglyphs. This suggests they have a record not of the Void Century, but of what led to the Void Century, potentially even before that. So how is it possible Joy Boy and the other creators of poneglyphs were aware of the true history of flooding was erasing the majority of it every 1,000 years? The scholars of O'Hara threatened the world government by researching poneglyphs which could reveal forbidden history. To stop this, the government launched a Buster Call, a massive military operation that destroyed the island and killed nearly all of its inhabitants, ensuring the knowledge remained hidden and showcasing their willingness to use extreme force to maintain their control. Along with the island, the 5,000-year-old Tree of Knowledge was destroyed, also symbolizing the last remnants of the true history being wiped out. This is just one example of the world government using destruction to maintain control, as we saw with Crocus, who ate lead after he nearly named the Ancient Kingdom. During the Void Century, the Ancient Kingdom, which posed a significant threat to the 20 kingdoms, who are the precursors to the world government, was destroyed. The details about this kingdom and its knowledge were wiped out to ensure the current regime's dominance and to prevent any resurgence of them as a threat. Anyone associated with this information is disposed of rapidly. We're seeing this all happen again with Vegapunk, who had mentioned multiple times Clover was a good friend of his. But now it's Vegapunk's turn to be fried for looking too deep into secrets that he shouldn't have been. We often see references to cleansing, which ties in here too. And as an example, we saw a purge of young children that had ties to Roger. This is a reflection of what King Herod did in the Bible after hearing the Messiah Jesus would be born and would threaten Herod's kingdom. The world government disposed of many babies as a way to prevent Roger's son from inheriting Roger's defiant legacy. A nice touch from Oda here is that similarly defiant was Rouge, Ace's mother, who impossibly held her pregnancy for over a year in order to keep the baby hidden from said purge. This cost her her life, and in an ironic twist, the Marines did eventually kill Ace years later in a public execution designed to undermine Roger's agenda. In Water 7, there was characters that we loved who were involved with the blueprints of Pluton, an ancient weapon. The world government viewed these blueprints as a major threat and deployed Cypherpole 9 to infiltrate and retrieve the blueprints. Through manipulation and assassination attempts, Cypherpole 9 demonstrated the government's strategy of using covert operations to destroy internal threats, which we saw they did by going undercover. One reoccurring example of the world government's destructive tendencies can be seen in the current chapters, where we are witnessing the Buster Call of Egghead. This is due to Vegapunk getting too close to the true history, and in a shocking turnaround, Vegapunk is now broadcasting similar information around the world. So the next method Imu uses to ensure control over the status quo is via taxation. Tributes are paid to the celestial dragons by the allied nations of the world. Despite their taxes being extortionate at times, people often do their best to pay in order to avoid trouble. The price of not paying the tax can be death, and even the destruction of entire islands. Arlong had a lot of hatred for human oppression, but then went on to claim a similar tax from the people of Orangetown, depicting how his suffering has led him to be as bad as the Celestials. This is a really good example of how Imu keeps people down and turns them against each other. During this arc, we also see how Marines can be corrupted, even behind the backs of the world government, which is another threat to Imu, as we know that some world government agents aren't loyal to the faction. The negative aspects of taxation are shown clearly by Bakori's rule of the South Blue Island Sorbet Kingdom. Bakori ramped up the taxation in a way that would split the population, leaving the south of the island annexed from the richer north. This reflects how Imu can manipulate regions into a war or poverty, reducing the direct threat to herself, and it does appear that Bakori returned after visiting the world government and implemented the idea based on their advice. Furthermore, we have Jinbei's cover story featuring a subtle reference to a tribute left for a sea god, but I'll leave that more cryptic example for you Giga theorists in the comments to discuss and work out. With Vegapunk's huge reveal to the world, it seems like Imu's time is coming to an end. Sabo recently stated pretty explicitly, who knew hell was at the top of the world, which is the real truth behind the status quo, and Oda showing that someone knows it now. The world government would no doubt relentlessly chase Sabo down, but as fate would have it, they believed he died in the Leisure Strike. This strike revealed once again how information can be intercepted and traced, shown through Sabo's call to the Revolutionary Army. But also, we do know other people that do this, for example Greenball, who has demonstrated similar vibes with Dendamushi's, including hacking. We know Oda loves his parallels, and when we saw Sabo stumble across Imu, we also saw Wapol, the previous king of Drum Island, catching a glimpse of the world government's biggest secret through a little peephole in the wall of the throne room. On first read, some may be thinking, what the chuff is Imu doing with a little glory hole in the most secret room in the entire world? Well, this could be explained with a parallel, or at least something tied to the event, as it may be that Lily, Joy Boy, or someone else from that era made the hole, or even saw Imu through it. It's definitely something Oda will bring up again, and could be a hint towards how the truth behind the real world was discovered by Joy Boy. Okay, so that's a brief overview of the methods by which Imu does control the world, but Let's ask the real question here. Why does Imu actually fear the truth? The story indicates that if secrecy is the key to Imu's control, then truth is the key to unlocking that control and freeing the world. We did just see Vivi's missing poster, and Luffy already said he wanted to go save her, but he was stopped by his own crew, so it's looking like Luffy and Imu might clash very soon. Luffy's abilities granted to him by the sun god Nika fruit, which was stolen from Cypher Pole by Shanks, are rooted deep in imagination. Imagination is a powerful tool in One Piece. It can have strong effects on a character's power and can even cause physical change. Usopp and Buggy have great imagination and are often rewarded for it, with Usopp's lies coming true or Buggy magically finding himself escaping a situation just to come out on top. And a quick fun fact, these two characters have actually never met. Anyway, by controlling a person's image of the world, Imu controls someone's imagination in the world. However, under duress, imagination grows. Desires grow. The spark needed to ignite these imaginations is the big reveal to the world of the truth through Vegapunk's speech. We saw a scene analogous to this with the Revolutionary Army rally with the posters of Sabo in the background. The bunting shows all the different factions that make up this alliance, and we'll definitely see these guys in action against the world government soon. In chapter 11:16, it was revealed that Joy Boy was the first pirate. Dragon was said to be a marine that became a pirate. This is Oda portraying how marines and pirates are not that different. It's the power above both of these parties that is the true oppressor. The world government uses the Marines as a vehicle to dispose of rebellious individuals and suppress those who may become a threat. The irony here is that if you are powerful enough to deny orders and do so, then you're effectively a sword member. Sword is in essence a pirate group of Marines. In other words, if the Navy and pirates were to join forces, the world government wouldn't stand a chance at resisting. All it would take is the right piece of true information or history to get leaked to bring this alliance about. I theorize we will see Vegapunk's speech trigger a global rebellion. The forces will overwhelm the world governments, and there will be some merger of the two in a greater force. As Imu's forces become weakened, Blackbeard will show up last minute like he always does to third party the situation and take Imu's power for himself. Now, here's something to think about before I leave. There are some people that seem to know a bit more than others, particularly some spicy stuff. And I'm not just talking about Blackbeard. We have Akainu, who listened to Vegapunk's message and seems completely indifferent. We have Sengoku, who definitely knows some of the secrets of the world, and this might connect to the goat that he carries around. Garp somehow knew about the Celestials' field trip, as he called it, to God Valley. Kong obviously knew about this situation too, and seemed to be involved in organising it to some degree. The reason for Zabek going to God Valley is likely down to a significant piece of true or secretive information, and this might also be why Oda has Kuzan defected from the world government. Kuzan might know something too, which I could imagine him passing down to Smoker or Toshigi or someone along them lines. I guess the most significant party that would know a truth is the D clan, but it is interesting that Imu described the D clan as a thorn in her side. That doesn't really sound like a big deal, you know, it sounds like a little deal. So maybe Imu isn't actually aware of some of the truth that these people have. We saw she was very surprised with the letter that Cobra read out from Lily, and it resulted in Cobra's death, so it definitely is looking like that. But anyway, thank you very, very much for watching. As always, like and sub, and drop a comment with any other examples, because there's thousands out there that I didn't include just for the sake of the length of the video. And I am going to follow this up with more prehistory and Void Century long-form content where I'm going to discuss how the world came to be, including underwater volcanoes, mixing with pyrobloin, which creates land and displaces water, which will lead us onto another video which is about flooding. So some of you might have already seen a preview of that. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. Consider becoming a member and getting exclusive content or features, or joining our Patreon and having some influence on creative decisions. As always, if you manage to reach this far, I'm going to send you Kuma's Bible. So be yourself, free yourself, and peace.